As we know, negotiations between people from different backgrounds can be difficult and are fraught with dangers. This is especially true if the negotiation is a cross-cultural negotiation. That is, the two negotiating parties have different cultural backgrounds. One's culture represents the shared beliefs, norms, and values that guide the everyday life of the group to which we belong. And values are what the group believes to be good, right, and desirable. Our values represent our shared assumptions about how things ought to be. Norms, on the other hand, are the social rules and guidelines that tells us how we should behave in any particular situation. How to behave when we meet someone for the first time. How to behave while sitting on an airplane. How to behave in a business meeting. And how to behave during a negotiation. An important factor and a determinant of whether a negotiation will be successful or not is whether or not the two parties are able to create a sense of trust between themselves. Well, trust is really the result of us acting and thinking in a way that is expected by the other side. That is, we trust people who behave in a way that we expect and are comfortable with. And this then shows us the main problem with cross-cultural negotiations. Since our expectations are determined by our values, our sense of how things ought to be, and our social norms, how people should behave in a particular situation, if the two parties have different values and different social norms, problems can easily develop. They are likely to violate each other's expectations and therefore be unable to create a sense of trust. For the rest of this video, I just want to highlight some dimensions across which different cultures differ and where some of the danger points might lie. One important cultural dimension is individualism versus collectivism. I'm sure that you have heard that Americans, people from the United States, are very individualistic. But what does that really mean? Well, on average, we would expect that social ties between individuals are very loose, and people are really only expected to look after their own self-interest and perhaps the interests of their immediate family. And because of this, American society provides a large degree of individual freedom. Basically, each individual is considered unique, and people should be valued in terms of their own unique achievements. This can be contrasted with a collectivist society, where social ties between individuals are tight and people are born into groups such as family, village, or religion. In a collectivist society, people are expected to protect the interests of the group in return for receiving the protections from the group. Basically, people are viewed as being part of groups, and they are valued in terms of the group to which they belong and their contributions to this group. Individualism and collectivism will affect how people make decisions. An individualistic society might favor individual decision making. A person that is decisive is viewed favorably. A collectivist society will be more likely to make group decisions. And naturally, group decisions will be slower since the aim to reach group consensus is often a slow process. As an example, in an international negotiation, an individualistic society might send a single person to the negotiation, and this person will be the decision maker with authority to make decisions on the spot. And this is a common approach in the US. A collectivist society is more likely to send a negotiation team, including many different stakeholders, and they will all probably have to check with headquarters and others before any final decision can be made. This is more common in, say, Japan or South Korea. We could, of course, ask ourselves which approach is better. Which approach will give you an advantage in the negotiation? I'll let you think about that. Another cultural dimension that is thought to be important is called power distance. Power distance refers on how society deals with the fact that people are different from each other. And power distance is defined as the extent to which the less powerful members expect and accept that power is distributed unequally. People from a society that scores high on the power distance dimension will expect that some individuals have more power and deserve to be treated accordingly. An organization in such a society will tend to have a high degree of centralization of authority and a high degree of autocratic leadership. The organization will tend to be hierarchical. A low power distance culture, like the United States and Sweden, will instead tend towards a more participative leadership style, where the manager will ask for input before making decisions, and others people's opinions will be valued, and decision making will be decentralized. An example of how power distance might influence a negotiation is how negotiators are expected to be treated during the negotiation. A negotiator from a high power distance culture like Brazil would take offense if the other side did not recognize and respect their standing and rank. For example, they might be insulted if we from the United States sent a lower ranked individual to the negotiation, or if their contributions were not recognized in the final agreement. Yet another cultural dimension is referred to as universalism versus particularism. This is a dimension that I feel is important, perhaps because I'm from Sweden. If your culture tends towards universalism, then you believe that what is good and right can be defined and always applies to everyone. And the implication is that all people should be treated the same and equally. This is not necessarily the case if your culture tends towards particularism. In this case, how a person should behave and how they should treat others depend on the circumstances and the relationship. That is, it is normal to treat people that we have a close relationship with very differently from the way we might treat strangers. In negotiations, these differences are most obvious in how we view a written contract. In the Universalist society, the contract is the goal of the negotiation. The reason we are meeting is to resolve various issues that can then be written down in a contract that we then agree to adhere to in the future. Particularism, on the other hand, view the creation of a relationship as the ultimate goal of the negotiation. Although a contract might be signed, it is really not needed because there is another reason why people keep their promises to each other. Namely, they have a strong relationship to each other. And if relationships change, perhaps because a person retires, then obligations will change, no matter what might have been written in a contract. A negotiator from a universalist culture might get in trouble as they will tend to ignore the relationship. In fact, we might talk about making sure to build a relationship with the other party, but it's really more of a transactional relationship. Either we build a relationship in order to create the necessary level of trust for an integrated negotiation to take place, or we build a relationship in order to learn something about the other party that we might be able to use to our advantage. As soon as we have achieved either one of those two, we are ready to move on to sign a contract. Another possible contrast is in terms of ethical behaviors. A person with a background in universalism will believe that everyone should be treated equally, and anything short of this is actually corruption. Not so for particularism. How we treat people depends completely on our relationship. If we don't have a relationship, if we're not friends, then I don't really have any obligation to you. Well, these are some cultural differences that can play an important role in whether a negotiation will be successful or not, whether it will proceed smoothly or not. But there are many, many others. For example, how much personal space is appropriate? Or how much should we touch the other party? Or how direct or indirect should our conversation be? Or how much emotion should we show during a negotiation? The list goes on and on. It is probably easy to understand that international negotiations, cross-cultural negotiations, will be much more difficult and complicated.